This is XY Spark, restoring holistic, healthy masculinity.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. How are you guys doing? Let me send a huge shout out to all those who are joining us here on XY Spark. Let me send a shout out to all my Instagram followers, those who are joining us on Facebook, those on LinkedIn, those on YouTube. Guys, welcome, welcome. Thank you. It's good that you guys have decided to be a part of this conversation. I am your men's coach, Rolando, and we're just here again. It's a Sunday afternoon here in northern Alberta. It's about 3:31 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. If you're in the eastern region, it's around about 5:31 right now. And if you are in farther west in Canada, it's around about 2:31 p.m. right now. Wherever you're joining us from, if you're in Australia, if you are in the UK, we just want you guys to know that we appreciate you. And we continue to just ask you guys to please like, comment, share as we continue to grow and build the XY Spark family as we seek to promote holistic, healthy masculinity. And the goal here for us as XY Spark is to just empower more of our listeners, in particularly more men, about ways that they can make personal development not just an event, but a lifestyle. And so this afternoon, our topic that we're going to be chatting about is how does setting boundaries help you to preserve mental wellness? How does setting boundaries help you to preserve mental wellness? And as usual, we welcome your comments. So if you're joining us live on Instagram, if you're joining us live on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on YouTube, wherever you're joining us live from, we will more than welcome your participation. If you want to join us to be a part of the discussion too, we're more than happy and open to do that, because the goal and the aim of XY Spark is to create a safe space for more of us as men, a safe space where we can engage in conversations similar to these, or sometimes even conversations that are a lot more, how do I say it, they're a lot more deeper than these. We would like you to come and participate in our conversation. So, where are you hailing us from? Want to send a shout out to you. And what we'd like you to do is, if you're watching this broadcast live, or if you are watching it later, we would like you to share, we'd like you to say where you have accessed this conversation from. And we'd like you to say also, how did listening to this podcast benefit you? And so, guys, thank you for being here with us again on XY Spark. So, we want to talk about boundaries this afternoon. Boundaries, boundaries. What does boundaries mean to you? What would you say is the importance of boundaries? Many of us, we really don't understand boundaries. Are there times in our lives when boundaries is not necessary, when we should just go with the flow? Or are we supposed to have boundaries in every areas of our lives as we continue to interact with friends, with family, and with the community? So, what does it mean to you to have boundaries? Do you think boundaries is a necessary thing for you to have? Do you need to set boundaries with your partner, with your kids, with your coworkers, with your siblings? Do you need to set boundaries in every area of your life, or should you just go with the flow every single day of your life? So, this afternoon, we're going to talk about setting boundaries and how it helps to preserve mental health, mental wellness. Now, one of the first pieces that I wanted to talk about as it relates to setting boundaries is that if we were to look at every era in our lives and everything that we participate in, there are some boundaries. If you are someone who works in oil and gas, you know there are some boundaries. If you're a lawyer, there are some boundaries. If you are a tradesman, there are some boundaries, and you follow those because you know that it is in following those boundaries that you are going to be able to have the most success. Now, in our relationships, we need to have boundaries. We need to set boundaries in all our relationships. And we need to set boundaries in everything that we do from day to day because when we do not have boundaries, we are easily led. We're easily persuaded. We're easily influenced. And oftentimes, as men, it is because we do not have certain boundaries why we get influenced so easily. And that is oftentimes why we make impulsive decisions and end up we end up rather harming ourselves or harming our relationships. So a man who doesn't understand the value in setting boundaries is a man who's going to be easily persuaded and end up making rash decisions or impulsive decisions in the moment that's going to impact him and impact his relationships negatively. So you want to look at how you set boundaries. You want to ask yourself some basic questions as it relates to setting boundaries. Number one is before you commit and before you make decisions, you want to ask yourself questions like these. Number one is how will making this decision bring value to me? How will this decision bring value to me? It's important to ask that question because remember that when you make a decision, if you make a decision that's impulsive or that's not well thought through, then you may end up seeking to do damage control later versus if you are taking the time to slow down and process properly, then you would have made better decisions. And so, asking the question, how will this decision bring value to my life, will help you to at least process and look at all the different areas and all the different ways that making this decision is going to impact you, whether negatively or positively. And more men has got to slow down and make better decisions. You know, sometimes our decision making is just like a gamble. We feel or we think that something is okay, and we just immediately bet on it, quote unquote, without even knowing or understanding all of the different dynamics that is wrapped up in you making an impulsive decision just like that. You have to understand that as a man you have a responsibility to first process properly before you commit or before you seek to dive off the deep end. And so more men have got to understand that oftentimes setting boundaries means that you have got to ask the right questions and you've got to think before you jump off the deep end. Setting boundaries in your life in every area is important because it will also help to lessen stress. Sometimes it's because we don't have good, healthy boundaries why we're so stressed as men and why we're so overwhelmed. For example, do you set boundaries in your professional role? Do you know when to say no? I will not do any overtime this week, or I've done enough overtime, I'm going to take a break. Or are you someone who have the mentality that you can finish work? Now, setting boundaries oftentimes mean that you've got to be aware that there is a time when you need to just take a step back and say no. So, learning to say no is also a very important part of understanding the value of setting boundaries. And for some of us as men, we don't know how to say no. We're people pleasers. We spend a lot of our lifetime trying to make sure that everybody else is happy. We try to make sure our employers are happy, our partners are happy, our kids are happy, our parents are happy, and we try to make sure that everybody else is happy at the expense of our own mental wellness. So oftentimes a good starting point. Hey, Alex, I see you, Alex, on Instagram. Thanks for joining us. A good starting point in setting boundaries is knowing and understanding the value of saying no. A lot of us as men, we struggle with that. We believe that if we say no, especially to the people in our lives that we love, we are going to disappoint them. But sometimes not saying no means we disappoint ourselves because we are not in the right place, the right frame of mind. We're not physically prepared to offer or to fulfill those desires that those that we love are asking for. And sometimes that saying no may look like taking some time to recharge and reset before you can come back. So saying no is not always a bad thing. We perceive it as a bad thing. But sometimes the saying no could be, hey, I can't do it now. But if you give me a couple of days or a couple of hours, I'll be able to get it done. I just can't do it right away. Right? So it's learning how to be assertive. It's learning how to recognize and know where you're at in the moment. And it is making it a lifestyle choice as you continue to work on setting boundaries. So knowing how to say no is a good part of setting good boundaries. So when you learn how to do that, it will definitely help to preserve your mental wellness because you'll be able to avoid burnout a lot more easier. You'll be able to avoid being in places where you feel resentful towards those around you that you care for or love. You'll be in a place where you're able to acknowledge the reality that you don't have all the answers. Thank you for joining us live on Instagram. We see you. And those who are on Instagram joining us, if you want to join in the conversation live, you're more than welcome to do so because we appreciate your feedback. So once again, we just want to reset the room and remind you guys that you're tuned to XY Spark. This is a podcast for men, by men. It's normally done with myself and my co-host. My son, he's not here today, but we're normally here every Sunday afternoon at 3:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And this is an open discussion. It's a live forum where men can come in and ask questions and where we are more than open and ready to talk with you. So please feel welcome to share and to ask any questions. So we're live here on Instagram, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and YouTube. And so we're talking about how the setting boundaries help you to preserve mental wellness. And so, reiterating what we said earlier, it helps to avoid burnout, helps to avoid resentment. It also helps to build more and create more transparency in your relationship. And sometimes, because we're not being transparent enough in our relationship, we're not mentally grounded, we're not present, we're not active enough as we ought to be. And so, we have to understand that setting boundaries helps us to have healthy relationships. So sometimes we want to have healthy relationships, but we feel fearful that if we share how we're feeling, or if we talk about the reality that there are some things that we can't do right away, we feel that it's compromising our masculinity. We feel that we will fail our partners if we're not talking about it. But setting boundaries is also important because it helps to facilitate more transparency. So it's talking to and interacting with your partner so they understand that it's not that you don't want to, it's just that at this moment you cannot. And more men has got to be brutally honest with themselves about how much value it is in them being okay to acknowledge that. You know, I want to say this, guys, that when you're in a good, healthy relationship, a good woman, a good partner will not judge you harshly if you assert yourself or if you are transparent with them and let them know that you are not able to at this moment. To setting good boundaries means being very aware of your mental state, your physical state, your social state, and your emotional state. Because sometimes we are scared. Yes, sometimes as men, we are scared because of those perceptions that we have about what people are going to think, or what our partner is going to think, or what will my parents think, or my kids, if I don't do this right away. Setting boundaries, guys, means that you've got to learn how to be brutally honest with yourself, and you've got to be able to do something about not being fearful to speak clearly and speak positively about the reasons why you are probably not able to do something right away. So, setting boundaries, guys, will help you to better your mental wellness because it also shows a lot about your personality. It shows a lot about your character. So, setting boundaries, guys, is also about being true to yourself. Are you true to yourself? You have to learn to be true to yourself. And every single day, it's one thing to set boundaries, but it's also a totally different thing if you understand the value in maintaining those boundaries. And the more and more we erode those boundaries, is the more we compromise on those boundaries, is the more we lose who we are as a person. So every man has got to understand the importance of being true to themselves and not losing the real essence of who you are as a person. And when you learn how to do that, you will preserve your mental wellness because you'll not be uncertain. You'll not be looking over your shoulders when you make decisions. You'll not do it, but in your gut, you're feeling like, why am I doing this? Why not them? But you will have a better mindset because you're being true to yourself. So, setting boundaries is very important, guys. Okay, I see you joining us, Joan, live on Instagram, and welcome to all our Instagram viewers. We're talking about the topic: how does setting boundaries help you to preserve mental wellness? And if you'd like to join the conversation or ask a question, you're more than welcome to do so. This is an open forum for men to come and talk. This is a safe space that we're aiming to create where more and more men can come and have these discussions. And if you are a female listener and you want to ask a question as well, you're more than welcome to do so. All right. Because we are all in the business of promoting holistic, healthy masculinity. That's our goal. And one of our mottos here is personal development is not an event, it's a lifestyle. And so we want to have conversations about how we can create that lifestyle and continue to grow as we practice awareness. So, how have you been setting boundaries in your life? What are some boundaries that you have that you would like to share with us in our conversation? Do you have boundaries? Do you consider boundaries to be important? And if so, why? Um, I was mentioning earlier about how every single day and everything that we do, there are boundaries that we follow. The speed limit. It's a boundary. It's there for safety, right? Uh, the amount of luggage that they carry in an airplane. It's about setting boundaries. The amount of what that they allow to feed into your outlets in your home. It's about setting boundaries. So every single thing that happens or that functions, you know, that has to do with your functioning has something to do with boundaries. So I want you to understand that as a man, if you are not setting boundaries, then you're exposing yourself for sudden chaotic, hurt, for pain, for a whole lot of different pieces. So I want you to understand that you've got to be very, very conscious about setting good and healthy boundaries. Because when you learn how to set boundaries, your life will be more structured. Okay, so you want to look at how you're going to be able to Make setting boundaries a part of your daily routine, where you understand that these are the things that I committed to, these are the things that I'm going to be doing going forward, these are the things that are a part of my non negotiables. So I've got to keep that going because this is what keeps me healthy. So if you don't have boundaries and yet you're expecting to stay grounded, to stay balanced, to function well, then I want to tell you it's not going to be something that happens just like that. You've got to be very, very consistent. Okay? That consistency is what you're going to need. That commitment is what you're going to need. When you're consistent and you're committed, then you'll stay connected and you'll avoid confusion as you grow into becoming the best version of yourself over and over again. And so that's the important piece, guys, of setting boundaries. And that's why setting boundaries is a good thing to help you to preserve your mental wellness, because now you will not be just operating as if to say it's a free for all. Because sometimes that's how we live our lives as men. You know, it's like a free for all. We're not really taking the time to acknowledge that these things work well for me when I do it, these things will not work well. And so the challenge that we have to deal with as men is we have to constantly confront our egos. We have to confront cultural norms. We have to confront all those beliefs that we were exposed to. We have to confront the ideas around how we were exposed to what it looks like to live our lives as men. And we've got to start creating that on our own so that we can become better as individuals. Now, if you're in a relationship and you have no boundaries, that relationship is not a healthy relationship. If you're with a partner and they don't respect your boundaries, it's not a healthy relationship. And so many times as men, we're in these relationships where there are no boundaries, it's anything goes. And we keep rationalizing and telling ourselves that things will get better, things will improve, that's just the way they are. You have got to stop making excuses for your partners if they are constantly confronting you and challenging you to erode your boundaries. So, what are some boundaries that you have eroded? If you are in a relationship now where before you didn't smoke as much or drink as much and now you're doing it, then you have eroded those boundaries. And you have got to look at how you regain control over that. If you're in a relationship and there are certain moral standards that you had before and now you find that you no longer consider those to be important, chances are you have eroded those boundaries. So maintaining boundaries, setting boundaries is not something that you do because of fear. It's something that you do to preserve your identity, to preserve who you are as a person. So setting boundaries is a very, very valuable thing for you to do because it also helps you to understand yourself more clearly, and it helps you to stay on, I would say, that yellow brick road that's going to take you to your ultimate goal and help you to be successful. So what boundaries do you have in place? And if you don't have any boundaries in place, I would like you to start considering the importance of setting good boundaries. And remember the question, number one question that I say I would like you to consider asking is, how will making this decision bring value to my life? Secondly, second question I want you to think about asking yourself is this, is what am I expecting to gain from making this decision? All right. How will it bring value? What am I expected to gain from making this decision? Also, the next question that you can ask yourself is, what's the best thing that could happen if I make this decision? And what's the worst thing could happen if I don't? All right. So you want to ask that question. Question number four that you need to ask yourself is this: is this decision a life or death issue? Or if I don't make the decision and I wake up tomorrow or next week, will this make a difference? And you need to ask those questions. Will this decision make a difference? If I don't do it now, will it make a difference? And you've got to understand the truth behind your drive to commit to doing something. You shouldn't be making decisions that is coming specifically from an impulsive place. You shouldn't be making decisions because you feel that you're being pressured by your peers. You shouldn't make a decision because you're fearful that if you don't do it, then you'll be judged harshly by those around you. You should be making decisions intelligently, based on your own persuasion, based on your own comfort zone, based on those things that you consider to be valuable for you. And so that's the piece around setting boundaries and maintaining them. So if you want to have good mental wellness and preserve your mental wellness, you've got to remember this, that your mental wellness, your mental health is your responsibility. All right? No one else can take ownership for that but you. That's not your partner's responsibility. That's not your kid's responsibility. That's not your preacher's responsibility, your counselors, your coach. That's nobody else's responsibility but yours. You have got to take ownership of your own mental wellness. And that is also an important part of setting good boundaries, because if you have no boundaries, then it's like that analogy with the big bad wolf and those who build their houses on sand, build their house out of straw and sticks. Very easily, the winds of life will blow your house in because you have no boundary. But if your house is built out of bricks, then you can easily know that when these different storms of life come, your house will stand firm, and those bricks symbolically represents those boundaries that you've set. If you don't have any boundaries set as a man, then any little wind that blows is going to topple you over. And that's when you struggle with things like anxiety and depression and self-sabotaging and low self-worth. That's when you find you can't stay committed in a relationship. That's when you're insecure. That's when you become narcissistic in your relationship, because you have no boundaries. So I want you to think about how valuable it is going to be for you to set some boundaries and start living your life in the way that you should live it, so that your mental wellness can be preserved. This is your coach, your boy Rolando. I appreciate that you guys joined us here today on XY Spark. Thanks to all our viewers who send a shout out on Instagram. We appreciate you. Shout out to you, Alex. Shout out to you, Dudu. Shout out to you, Joan. Thanks for giving us your time here. Shout out to those who join us live on Facebook and LinkedIn and on YouTube. Please join us again next week, same time, when we'll have another conversation as it relates to men and their mental wellness. We appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you again next week, same time, same place. Listen, you guys just take care. And as usual here at XY Spark, we say this: we believe that there is a spark in you.
This is XY Spark, restoring holistic, healthy masculinity.